Hi, everybody. This is Sam, NFT Statistics, and this is 100 Proof. Now, it's a bit of a different look and feel than you're used to. Normally, we have Kevin or Derek on the show. Unfortunately, neither could make it this week, but we are going to do the show every Friday regardless. And I think we got two of the best people you could have for the show, but really specifically for this moment. First, we got Zeneca and we got Eli here. Eli is the head of art at Proof, really just the man behind the scenes that is doing everything related to Grails, really just deep in the art world. And I think with all the museum news and everything happening, he's just perfect to have this week. But Eli, do you want to introduce yourself real quickly?
Yeah, I mean, great to be here with you guys, Zen, Sam. This is going to be a lot of fun. Excited to dig into all of the news from the week. This is going to be good.
Great. And then we also have Zeneca. I think Zeneca is one of the best known people in the NFT space has done so much interesting stuff in the space, and particularly has been very close with Blur, and Blur had a ton of news this week. And obviously we just had some breaking news from OpenSea, which we will all dig into. But Zeneca, how do you like to introduce yourself?
I mean, that's a very good question. It changes every single time. Really happy to be here. I guess the best way to introduce myself, I've been in the space for about 2 years. I used to trade a lot. Now I run a project, Zen Academy. It's an educational community, and we create a lot of content. That's in a nutshell. And then obviously I have some affiliation with Blur.
Yeah. I have to give Zen a huge thank you for being here. It is 2:30 right now in Dubai, where he is.
That is correct.
You know, I woke up at 1:30 this morning, and I thought I was the tired one, and then Zen tells us it's 2:30 where he is. So
we're both running on fumes.
Running on fumes, running on hot takes and opinions. We all got them, and coffee will help us all through the show. But excited to be here. Quick housekeeping things. First, follow Proof Podcasts. What we created this at Proof Podcasts Twitter account. The goal was just a Twitter account where you didn't have to hear my opinions. You didn't have to hear Proof's opinions. It just sends you notifications every time we launch a new podcast. So follow that account. And yeah, if you do it with notifications, you'll just get alerts anytime we launch 100 Proof, artist profile, or the daily show, which I've been doing. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Sam. I'm the director of research at Proof. And one of the things I've been doing lately for the past month right now is a daily show. We make it 10 to 15 minutes every morning. We wanted it to be 5 to 10 minutes. It turns out it's 10 to 15 minutes, where we just cover everything that happened over the past 24 hours, the most important stories. And I try to bring a lot of charts and analysis into that to really kind of show numbers and the pictures that define kind of what's happened in NFTs. We'll actually roll a quick clip from that right now, so you can have a quick listen to what that sounds like. There has been $254 million of liquidity dropped to NFT people. So that's just a lot of dollars, a lot of ETH in the hands of people who like to trade NFTs. $2.4 billion market cap. That compares to Looks Rare and X2Y2, which are around 200 to 300 million. So something like 9x as big as the other exchanges. Now, if you look at the Blur market, the Blur airdrop, and compare that to other projects, just based on the floor prices, the Blur airdrop had more US dollar or more money sent to the DJing community than the entire market cap of Chromie Squiggles, Azukis, CloneX, Moonbirds, Pudgy Penguins, Doodles. So really pretty tremendous how much money kind of came through this.
Yeah, and Sam, I got to give you huge props. You've been killing it every day. I know you're up super early doing the research, the analysis, cranking these out. We've got an amazing team here behind the scenes, making sure that those get out every single day, every weekday. You're killing it, man. So well done.
Thank you. I mean, I think it is one of those things where I do these videos and then I send them to our editor, and it's amazing to watch what like a top tier Hollywood production company, that level of talent can do with a video. It's one of the great things about working at Proof. I know that Kevin has brought just some fantastic people, obviously Mao, but then also Gabby, Corporate Trash are all just great to work with. Should we get to it though?
Let's go.
All right. So Zen, I guess the first question I'm curious to hear your thoughts on is, we just got some huge news from OpenSea, massive news and I think the 3 bullet points were, one, that they were going to get rid of their platform fee for a while. So for a while, OpenSea had a 2.5% platform fee. Other platforms were at half of 1%. Blur was at 0%, and Blur said, okay, or OpenSea said, we're going to 0. OpenSea also said that they're no longer going to enforce royalties on any collections that are immutable. So basically, the collections where you can't adjust the contract in any way, shape, or form, OpenSea said we are no longer going to enforce royalties. They will be optional. We will enforce 0.5%, which is what Blur does. So that was the second part of the announcement. And then the third thing was that new projects who can blacklist exchanges, OpenSea has said, okay, we are going to continue to enforce royalties on those projects as long as you block other exchanges, that do not enforce royalties. So there's a lot to swallow there. I think even those of us who live in this space, it's a lot to swallow. But what was your thought? You saw that announcement. What'd you think?
Yeah, I'm still processing because it was like an hour ago that it came out, hour and a half. I was kind of shocked, but not at the same time. I guess is probably the best reaction, where I was like, wow, this is obviously a huge move. It is very significant. It kind of goes against like their entire ethos of being pro-creator and really doing everything they can to support creators. But at the same time, it's not surprising given how much market share they had been losing. And in order to remain competitive, they needed to do something drastic. And so that's it. Like, it's not a very based opinion. It's like, I was shocked, but not that shocked.
Yeah. I think that was similar. When I was looking at the data yesterday, and you and I were actually talking over DM, and I saw like OpenSea is basically down to 5 to 10% market share on Pudgy Penguins, on Azuki. And I think Pudgy Penguins and Azuki are interesting projects because a lot of projects, people are down, have lost money, but I think the people who lost money in Azuki are gone. And for the past 5 months, that project's gone up, right? Pudgy Penguins has been one of the most successful projects of the past 6 months. And on both of those projects, their royalty rates are 0.5% on average. OpenSea has no market share. So the market, like in these cases, has just moved away from OpenSea when they've had these options to not pay royalties, when they have to get. So I was just thinking, OpenSea said like we're going to keep royalties in force forever. When they said that, that was the most surprising announcement of all to me. When they said, I know one or two people. I said, "What are you doing, making this a permanent move?" Yeah. And now they're like, "Oh, we're in it for good." And I was like, "That's gonna, And what you and I said yesterday is like, you can stand up for what you believe in, but if you have 10% market share, and the market's decided we're not going to pay royalties, then no one's listening to your message. It's not much of a moral victory. So I wasn't too surprised here. I was a little surprised that they made the move on everything, because if you look at art blocks, you look at brain drops, you look at a lot of those projects have not gone. The market hasn't moved yet. Brain drops can be traded on Blur. They're not, the vast majority of brain drops are still on OpenSea. People are still paying royalties. A lot of the artist projects, people are still paying royalties. So that was a little bit of a surprise. I thought maybe they'd say if we have less than 50% market share or something, maybe. I kind of expected something like that. But what did you think, Zen or Eli? Did you guys have thoughts on?
Go ahead, Zen.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to echo what you said. It was surprising to be so blanket because of the same reasons. Art blocks, ERC 1155s, ENS, and just like collections that weren't being traded on low royalty marketplaces. There was no immediate impetus for them to do that. I mean, they could have left themselves the door open in the future to say, you're right, like you said, 50% market share, we'll maintain royalties, but then if it gets to a certain point, it doesn't really matter, and so we're going to change. But Eli, would love to know your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I was going to pose this back to you, Sam, as you were talking. It's like, we talk in terms of market share as this single pie. And then, I think we started to get into it here. It's like, what are those verticals? What are those particular slices of that market share that haven't moved over? And then we just touched on a few of the examples. And I think, we might see something happen here where I think there's a world where new communities develop around different marketplaces. Like it's increasingly difficult for me to see the value proposition of collecting and trading on OpenSea, for example, if I'm interested in art blocks or generative art. Like there are better user experiences elsewhere. And I think that's going to lead to these communities developing around those platforms and those marketplaces. Like we've kind of seen a version of that with Super Rare, right? Like super rare on the one of one side used to be totally dominant across the board. And to be clear, like I have so much respect for everything they've done. They're still producing and creating a great product. But I think we're seeing some of that volume on the one of one side go to these niche, smaller communities that are evolving around, for example, AOTM. And so like, when I think about 6-12 months out, where are people collecting generative art? Like maybe it's Sansa, maybe it's a native marketplace, maybe it's on art blocks. So just it's fascinating to start to slice up that market share and see where the volume moves.
Yeah, I wanted to run the numbers on Sansa. I don't know if this is going to push people away. I mean, I think from a collector side, if collectors stuck around when they were paying the royalties, they can keep paying the royalties now, right? Like the option is still there too. So I don't know if giving the collectors the option not to pay is going to move them away, and I think it is kind of wild how sticky OpenSea has been for art blocks, for example. Like they have so, Dandelion Wist, of QQL built his own marketplace that was unquestionably a more pleasing experience than OpenSea. And he just shut it down because he's like, it's not worth it. It's too hard to gain market share.
So let me put that back. Sorry, Sam. Let me put that back to both of you. Why do you think OpenSea, for example, is so sticky? Like, is it the liquidity? Why are people not more comfortable, adept at moving to different platforms and marketplaces?
I'll just jump in first, and then I want to go to Zen because I think the reason we're here is because it's not that sticky, right? It's been very, very sticky for art blocks. But it proved not that sticky for Azuki, for Bored Apes, Other Deed had 4,000 trades yesterday, and I think something like 95% of them were on Blur. So, but I think there are a few things, and I personally think the biggest thing is price. OpenSea for the past 2 to 3 months has been 7.5% more expensive than Blur. Maybe 7, and maybe that's actually the wrong number, but the average royalty paid on OpenSea for the past month has been 5%. The average royalty paid on Blur is half of 1%. 0.6, 0.7%. So you're paying 4.3% more on every trade for OpenSea if you are someone who does not want to pay royalties, which we're learning is a lot of people in this community, both on the trading and collecting side. There are exceptions, but I think the data is starting to show that most people are in that camp. The second thing is they're charging a 2.5% platform fee. So you put that together and people are paying 6.8%. I'm sorry, I'm too tired for math, but 6.5 to 7% more on every single trade. It's just, there's no economic model where you can do that. And I think the royalty thing's the hardest part, because at least with 2.5%, you're getting money back to your business that you can invest. But with royalties, you're not even, as a business, you are standing up for the value you believe in. And I've been extremely critical of OpenSea about a lot of things. I think on their frozen asset policy, they've told me I was one of the most kind of outspoken people against what they were doing, and they had to think about it a lot. But I have commended them on royalties, because I did think they really stuck their neck out when Magic Eden just went to zero royalty. The whole world had gone to zero. They stuck their neck out. But at the end of the day, economics says you can't survive if you're charging 6.5% more on every single trade. And I think that's just what the market has shown us. And then on top of that, you got this token, and we got to talk about this token. On top of that, Blur just got $3 billion of market cap. Obviously only, 12% of that's out in the world right now, but that's money that they can give back to their community, because the trading community is valuing this token at $3 billion. Like, they just had all these competitive advantages. And I think OpenSea had to say, okay, we're cutting off at least one of them. The one we have control over right now, we're going to cut off. I just rambled a lot. Zeneca, what jumped out at you?
What I was going to say is exactly where you ended, is the stickiness of OpenSea, because it has worked for art blocks because none of the alternatives, I believe, offered a token, offered incentives. They offered slightly lower fees, but that was kind of it. Whereas with Blur, I guess Blur is obviously the biggest example. There were the platform was great, but also there were these token incentives and lower fees, obviously, that incentivized a lot of people, as well as the fact that art blocks is one collection. And so people go to OpenSea to buy art blocks, and that's what they used to. Whereas, let's say Pudgy Penguin, Suzuki, Other Deeds, that's like there's a million other types of collections. So if you go into Blur for one of them, you see them all and you're like, oh, I might as well just trade that here as well. And then and also just like routine. I think a lot of people are just in the habit of checking OpenSea for art blocks, and then it's just hard to get people away from an incumbent. But as time goes on, I think we'll see more. Like I believe art blocks, the platform itself, is pretty close to incorporating their own marketplace or something like that. So that to me is like the next step, and where I actually kind of predict this entire thing going is, and this is only a thought I've really formulated in the last 2 hours, but is more and more projects will have their own marketplaces. Some of them, like art blocks, will just encourage their users to use their marketplace. And I think that because of the collector base they have, and I hope and believe a significant amount of people will use their marketplace, will pay royalties, artists will be supported, it will be great. With other things like PFP projects, when you have 10,000 holders and the vast majority of them are there to flip or make money, unless there is a contractual like obligation to use a particular marketplace, people go to the lowest. So what I think we'll see is like centralized marketplaces for, let's say, Pudgy Penguins. They're like, all right, well, we're migrating to a new contract. You can't trade maybe, or a new collection. You can only trade them on our marketplace. And yes, that is centralized and not in the spirit of crypto and blockchain, but all of these projects, they're centralized entities. Pudgy Penguin, so much of the value is reliant on Luca and the team and delivering X, Y, and Z in the community. So it's like it's justifiable to a certain extent, and that's kind of where I see things going, for better or worse.
I do find that there are very few projects, or very few. There are a lot of NFT projects where there is just a very centralized nature. Either you're reliant on the team. You know, when people say devs do something, you're basically saying, "Hey, centralized organization, please help." Mm-hmm. You know, in a lot of cases, I think you obviously have CryptoPunks. You know, maybe Chromie Squiggles, maybe Chromie Squiggles. I think the way that Snowfur wants to build art blocks, really, there is a decentralized component, but just so many of NFTs, there is a centralized nature, and it does feel like when people start using the centralization case, it feels like it gets pulled out selectively. And I think there are great cases. There are times where it's very appropriate, but with like a ton of NFT use cases, I'm not sure if we really have that ground to stand on. But one thing I'm curious your take on, Zeneca, because I know that you're deep in art blocks and you've just been in this game for so long, is this idea of loyalty and collectors who want to pay royalties. Mm-hmm. And I think, when OpenSea initially got one thing that was interesting was OpenSea kind of went out and said, we're thinking about doing this. They just got completely lambasted for it. And then they did a couple steps back and said, okay. And this time they just said, forget it. We're doing what Magic Eden did. We've made the decision. We're going to take the blowback, but this is what we have to do. But that last time, one of the common threads was a lot of the really high-end collectors saying, our community is different. Our community wants to pay royalties. I think, and so just make them, so don't make them optional so that people can free ride, because we actually want to. Do you think that there's a case there? And I guess I see three different kind of tiers. I think it's like you have one of ones, like the really high end people who are out there buying X copy one of ones or whatever. Then you got art blocks and some of these kind of people who have a little bit more kind of theoretical connection to the artist. And then you have the PFP world, which I think the market has just given us definitive data where that stands. But what do you think?
I mean, the answer is it depends, as with every good question. I think, so for a very long time, in let's say 2021, when I was very active in art blocks, and the options for trading NFTs were basically OpenSea, especially art blocks, or OTC trades. And SudoSwap was one of the main ones back then, where you trade for ETH or something else. Sometimes it was done to bypass the OpenSea 2.5% fee, which I think was totally fair. And to me, it seemed like quite frequently, maybe in fact, in most cases, the people conducting that trade, they would reach out to the artist and pay them a royalty, and potentially art blocks as well, because they felt it was the right thing to do and they wanted to do it. And I think that there is a strong, loyal core base of collectors and artists. Like artists are collectors as well. A huge amount of people collecting art blocks are artists themselves. And I think that, I really believe that there will be a significant amount of people that will choose to pay royalties, even though it's slightly more expensive. However, the tricky part comes in when the flippers start entering the game. And it's undeniable that there's a ton of flippers, especially in art blocks lately, that it's a whole botting problem. And so they will not pay royalties. And it's just, I don't know where that ends up and how the market equilibrium will settle. But it's like the end of the day, some people will always find a way to bypass royalties if they can. And that's inevitable. And then some people will pay the royalties, and it's just, I don't know, it's a cultural thing, I think.
I do think there's this trend. Pac-Man and I talked about this one time when I spoke with Pac-Man on Fun. I do think there's this trend once you start seeing, like, it was interesting if you look at the Blur average royalty rate, it actually started at 2.5%. And week by week, it went lower, 2.5 to 2 to 1.5 to 0.06 to 0.6 to 0.7. Like, and I think there is this thing where at first you don't want to, at first you're like, I'm going to be the guy who's different. And I will say this, I'll say this on record. I've paid every single, I have done some trades on royalty on Blur because I do like the no marketplace fee, but I have always paid those royalties, even on a clone where I was down like 10 ETH. But that said, my sense just from looking at the data is and just from observing my own thing. Like if I weren't someone, who I felt like I have a reputation to protect, who knows? Like, but every time you're trading, you're like, it's like, do I really want to send this 0.2 ETH to a huge corporation or to this artist who's completely killing it? Or do I want to, take my wife out to dinner? And I think over time that culture erodes when you notice everyone else is doing it. So I just think there is this kind of natural communal move down, especially when you're out of that one-of-one space.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's unfair, but that's just kind of what I've observed in the market's behavior and the way that the data just trends towards those minimum numbers.
Yeah. And just quickly, Sam, to double click back into that point we were making earlier, I think if there's a community that forms around a certain norm of not paying royalties, to your point exactly, Sam, I think on the other end, right, if communities form around this notion of royalties are fundamental, this is what it means to pay them, these are the incentives, maybe if not immaterial, somewhat immaterial, like credibility with artists and other collectors, that I think that's going to happen in a real way as well in that higher end for sure, as we're saying.
I'm excited to see the data on that. I like it because I have looked for that. I thought that the collections that were up would be that in the PFP world, and the market proved me wrong. Obviously that's different, but my view, I've gotten more cynical. I'm not gonna lie. But the good news is it's pointless for us to talk. There's a lot more for us to talk about. We'll see the data in the next few months. We'll get that opportunity to see, are there art blocks communities that say, forget this, we want to support artists? Are there one-of-ones where they're just like, forget, I know we don't have to pay it, but we're going to support artists. Like, we are going to get the chance to see that in the data. And that's what I love about NFTs is you just learn more about human behavior every day.
Can I ask you guys a quick thing? So with the Blur airdrop, I claimed mine and I had to tick that I was not in the US or not a US. Like, what was that all about?
Well, I mean, I can try and speak to it. I am not a lawyer. I'm certainly not Blur's lawyer. Basically, in my view, it is because the SEC clamps down on US citizens, and actually probably more so, it clamps down on organizations offering securities or potential securities to American citizens. We've seen it with ApeCoin. They're coming after ApeCoin. They're going after Kraken. They're going after BUSD. And I think, even when Ape staking went live, there was the same thing, whereas like this website is not usable if you're a US citizen. And it was, I guess, the beginning, like it's just a wake up call. It's like, oh, okay, so that's just companies or rather organizations trying to protect themselves by, not poking the SEC bear, Gary Gensler. And I guess it's the same thing with Blur is my speculation.
What do you think is in the Blur response? Do you think there'll be a response? I mean, they said, one of the things that they made in their announcement yesterday, because yesterday they announced we are not going to enforce royalties on any collections unless you block OpenSea above the 0.5%. That was the announcement they made. And the way they positioned it was that they were putting pressure on OpenSea to do exactly what OpenSea just did. They said, the reason we're doing this is because OpenSea is forcing you to block us, even if we enforce royalties. So how about we just do a thing where, one of the things for people who are pro-creator, I see myself as pro-creator. I think royalties are a decent thing, sometimes too high. I think, I have mixed views, but broadly speaking, I don't like marketplaces making those decisions for creators. But, for people with that view, the kind of good thing that came out here was for new projects right now, you can get enforced on both Blur and OpenSea. They've both said we are going to allow royalty enforcement as long as you block non-enforcing exchanges, and Blur and OpenSea are both enforcing exchanges for new projects. So they kind of got what they asked for, and what they said, we hope OpenSea is going to make this move. I'm sure they didn't want the margin contraction that happened, but do you think there's a response here that Blur makes, or do you think it's just back to business?
I don't think that there's a massive response. It's sort of like, this is what we wanted. It happened. It's and going forward, it's a good thing for new creators to get enforced royalties. So maybe there'll be an announcement, but I don't think they're going to make like policy changes or changes to the any approach. But I could be proven wrong.
Yeah. Eli's question kind of brings us to another topic that I think would be fun to discuss. I mean, the one, again, the big advantage that Blur still has is the token, and I think it's going to be very hard for OpenSea as an American company, to say, check this box to confirm you're not in the US. The legal obstacles to Blur getting a token that they can throw at users is going to be a lot higher. They have a much bigger equity stack, the whole 9 yards. What was your thought, Zen, kind of on the Blur drop? What do you think are strategies that make sense for people who want to make Blur? As a data person, I'm trying to figure out what's going on in the market. And I see days like today where ETH volume's at a 9-month high, but unique buyers is actually below the 1-month average. So you just have these very weird dynamics where you have people doing crazy things in this marketplace, clearly because there is a $3 billion market cap that you want to get your piece of. And that Blur is very generously giving, not generous is the right word, but is very clearly given to people. What do you think, what's going on out there? What's going on in this marketplace? And what do you think, what would be your advice to people who want to make money here? Yeah,
so effectively Blur airdropped 12% of the maximum supply to the community who participated in the last 6-8 months of reward programs, and they have and they call that season 1, and then now season 2 is has started and is ongoing, and I believe 10% of the total circulating supply. So 360 million for the first airdrop, 300 million Blur tokens in the next airdrop will be distributed back to the community based on a similar reward system. Listing, selling, bidding, et cetera, et cetera. What I believe happened is most people underestimated how large or impactful the Blur airdrop was going to be. So there were a handful of people that were like intensely bidding and strategizing to like maximize their points. But most people just sort of dismissed it out of hand and like, oh, this is going to be another SOS, Lux, X2, Y2, whatever type of coin. It probably isn't going to be significant, especially in this market. And so it was underestimated. Now the market is like, holy shit, 2-3 billion. So many people, Franklin made 500 ETH or whatever it was. And so many other people made 20, 30, whatever. Let's figure out how we can get more Blur points. And I think the result is going to be way more competitive. So there's way more people bidding. And while the total tokens, 300 million is going to be, it's relatively similar. It's 10, 17, this is doing math again, 17% less than 360. But it is going to be divided amongst so many more people. So I think individuals will probably get less, but there's so many variables. Like the price of Blur could go up, price of Blur could go way down. It's I don't know. I think people, my general advice is to do what you would normally do, like do your daily active trading or weekly active, whatever, and maybe give a slight preference to Blur if you are interested in receiving some tokens. If you want to try and maximize by, bidding strategies and stuff, realize that it's risky. You could end up with a whole bunch of NFTs that you didn't want, that you can't sell, and just like that's sort of advanced stuff. And I would just recommend do your own research, figure it out for yourself. It's one of those things where it's like, if you're asking me to tell you what to do, you're probably not going to get it right. You should need to figure it out on your own and execute a strategy. And if whatever I said, if it works, there's, I don't know, thousands of people listening to this. It's just, that kills it already. So, yeah.
Yeah. I threw this picture up here. I mean, I think this is an important diagram. It basically shows how the blur will be distributed over time. We're at like the very first data point. Only 12% is out there. 51% is going to the community. So you're going to, so 39% more, basically 4x of what's been given will be given in the future. But I think you're right. Like, I think you are seeing a lot of people going in, trying to airdrop farm and getting hurt. Online, I use the word wash trading, and everyone's like, it's not wash trading, it's not wash trading, and I think what they're saying, and I think it's a fair thing to say, wash trading is people on X2Y2 like literally just sending a 50 ETH NFT to themselves. This is people taking real risk. Like people are buying 100 other deeds and then hoping they can dump it to someone, at a price not too, you can lose money because you're ultimately going to be getting the money from Blur, but not that much. So or maybe a lot, maybe just there's so much Blur to go around that it's okay. I also agree though, like I've always thought this narrative of look at what happened to Lux token is just so far off. Like if anybody was paying attention when Lux was around, when Lux launched, you couldn't even sort by price. You couldn't even sort your NFTs by price. Like nothing was on there. Like they launched first and asked questions later, whereas Blur has just nailed it every step along the way. They are so in touch with traders. And I personally don't even buy the whole trader thing. I think Blur wants to be for everybody, but I think they're in touch with, and sorry, Zen, I know I don't want to tell you what a company you're close to strategy is, but
it's not my company. Yeah.
I think they've just created a great tool that's differentiated and unique. And perhaps one of the exciting things about this margin thing now is we'll get to see, obviously OpenSea has a habit, even though Blur has so much more volume, OpenSea still has more users, more more buyers, more sellers every day. But it'll be interesting to see now without this margin advantage, you get to compete on product more or less. I don't know if that's an appropriate thing to say, but that's kind of my view, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But anybody who compares Blur to Looks Rare hasn't been paying attention, either to how good Blur has been at executing and to creating products that their audience wants, and to be fair, like how I would say not great Looks Rare was, when they did that 6 months ago. But
what's interesting, guys, is like these incentives, the token farming and the airdrop, season 1, now season 2, I think have demonstrated that they're incredibly successful incentives and drivers of usage, right? We've seen that amongst existing market participants. I'd like to see a world where some token allocation goes to somehow net new users to the space. Like, how do you use a token for a marketplace to onboard new market participants? It feels like kind of low-hanging fruit in some respects. I don't know how you execute that and get it done, but if we're going to do it, this feels like one of the mechanisms to explore for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'm all about onboarding, and incentivizing it in some way, shape, or form is great. And kind of the cool thing with Blur now is that there is a community token. People can, when the infrastructure is running well, make proposals. And this could be kind of like ApeDAO. People make proposals and like, all right, let's allocate X amount of Blur to this initiative and vote on it. And if it passes, then execute it and discuss it. And I think that kind of cool stuff where it's, the community has a real say in direction is really cool to me.
Cool. Well, I think we should move on, just because I think we could talk about this for 3 hours.
We could. Can I just share one last story? Because I heard this on my Twitter space like 2 hours ago, and I just can't. It's the perfect analogy to me. I believe James Richard Fry said it, and he was telling a story of Simon Sinek, who wrote The Infinite Game, really great book, and in it he talks of how back in the 2000s he went to like a Microsoft conference, and everyone at the Microsoft conference was talking about Apple and how can we beat Apple, and Apple is doing this and that. And then he went to an Apple conference, and everyone at the Apple conference was talking about how do we make a better product, how do we make our users happy, how do we do this and that. And that just parallel between, OpenSea seems to be reacting a lot to Blur and other, whereas Blur seems to be focused on how do we make a better product, how do we do what traders want, how do we increase like bidding pools. That it just stuck in my head, and I think there's something there.
Well, Zen, this is a product builder, right? It's like there's good information to take in from competitors and others in the space. There are learnings, and you can't totally run your own race. But at the same time, that can be a lot of noise and a distraction from a really cogent, good strategy. Mm-hmm. So I always find that, for us at Proof, in my past building products, it's finding that right balance between being aware of what's happening broadly in the space, those trends, what are some of the other players doing, but also having high conviction in your own path. So finding that's always been interesting as a product builder.
100%. Yeah, I kind of see the thing I would close. I see kind of both a very good and a bad here, right? I think the good thing is one thing about this space, or one thing about the world, is it's just impossible to break through monopolies. And I think OpenSea had that monopoly for so long. And now that you don't have a monopoly, and I worked at Uber, I remember how much better the competition with Lyft made both companies. Yeah. But when you have a monopoly, you just that pressure to do better isn't there. And I felt it all the time when I was pressuring them on frozen assets. There's they had no reason to, because they had a monopoly. So I think it's like and now you have a situation where you have two competitors who both have enough market share that you're relevant, and you get to compete on product. I think, from a business perspective, the fact that artists have been cut out at this point, and we have to go to a place where there's, where if I were a shareholder in either, which I'm not, you basically just destroyed each other's margins to get here. But I guess that's how a competitor has to. So I think in some ways, I think there is something good as far as we have competitors now who are going to be competing on product, not on margin, and best player wins. You've got an even race, which is almost impossible without this kind of undercutting they did. But it does also show that at the end of the day, when you cut margins, eventually everybody loses, and you just get back to where you are, just you're making less money. So that was kind of my last thought there. If that, yeah.
I mean, like you said, I could keep going back and forth, but we should probably move on.
All right, so I didn't mean to get the last word, especially. Sorry, I apologize on that, but no, that was a good conversation, Zen. Thank you for coming in and everything. One thing I wanted to have, because we have Eli on this call, I thought talking about LACMA. There's been this massive trend right now where art museums are adopting. Art museums are bringing on CryptoPunks. Art museums are bringing on generative art. I think one of the stories we've all been excited about all year has been the potential of the MoMA buying it. Who knows if that'll even happen? I feel terrible saying it, because if MoMA's listening, they're like, "Where'd you get this? You're talking rumors." I don't know, but I feel like this is kind of the catalyst we've been waiting for, and it feels like it's playing out. Eli, do you want to talk a little bit about the LACMA donation? And I know you're in LA right now for this event. What was your experience there?
Yeah. So let's we'll give a little context here. So earlier this week, Cosimo donated. I think. I don't want to put a dollar figure on it, but he made a very generous donation to LACMA in LA, and that included pieces from Dimitri Cherniak, Claire Silver, Pinder Van Arman, a CryptoPunk. I think a zombie, if I'm not mistaken. No. It's sort of an incredible CryptoPunk to include there. Justin Aversano as well. And, to your point, Sam, this is this continued trend of institutions and really meaningful institutions taking digital art and NFTs very seriously. Now, LACMA is interesting because this goes way back for them, not on the NFT side, but on the computer art and digital side. I went to this exhibition there. You mentioned I'm out in LA at the moment, called Coded on Tuesday with the curator, Leslie Jones. And she spent 10 years putting this exhibition together, and it's fascinating. There's words from Vera Molnar, Frater Naki, many others, and walking through this origin of digital art and computer art, generative art, really instructive for how seriously the major institutions are taking this work and this medium now. I think LACMA, they've again been sort of this, and you see a couple of the pieces donated by Cause earlier this week. But LACMA in particular, really leading the way here. There was a piece from Krista Kim that was donated in June, I think. And so this is again just this continued trend of institutions really being the leaders here, rather than in some respects the collectors. And I always thought it would be the inverse, right? I thought, okay, we're going to get mass adoption in the traditional art world, and it's going to come first from the collector side. And we're going to onboard these higher net worth traditional art collectors, and that will have downstream impacts, and then the institutions will come. And I think, as I said, we've in some respects really seen the inverse, and that the institutions are leaning in a more serious way. And that's interesting for a bunch of reasons. You can imagine over a longer time horizon, these pieces are going to be shown in the permanent collections, on display, exhibited for hundreds of thousands of viewers every year. I think LACMA has 650,000 visitors annually. So like, we might see some impact on the market over a short time horizon, but you look out 2, 5, 10 years as these works increasingly are shown in permanent collections around the world. And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah. This news this week, I jump for joy. This is like incredible. And like I don't know. It's like, this is what we've been waiting for. Like for years, people are like, all right, eventually this stuff will be in museums. Eventually. And it's happening. Like it's, and not just like some niche, obscure, small, like LACMA is one of the largest in the world, in the US, and it's just like enormous. And the fact that they're embracing NFTs, they're displaying NFTs in their permanent collection it's just like, I think for so many of us in the space, collectors, I don't want to speak for artists, but like as a collector, we buy things we like, we want to support artists, and we have this belief that these are really, aside from just like being aesthetically pleasing, there's like cultural significance. These are really monumental, significant pieces in the history of not just NFTs, not just digital art, but art. It's like there's this talk of like a new art revolution is happening with digital art, with NFTs, and there's like this pipe dream of, all right, they'll be in museums one day and revered, but all of that comes down to like acceptance and validation from the traditional art world. I think like as different as this space is from traditional art, and I think a lot of what attracts people to NFTs is the differences between the trad art world, where it's not gated in the same ways and all that kind of stuff. However, it's just like, this is the validation we've been waiting for, and it's just like I get chills down my spine and emotional thinking about it. I mean, I'm looking at this screen. I own a CryptoPunk. I own a Fragments of Infinite Field by Monica Rizzoli. These are now it's just mind blowing, and it's awesome. Just it's awesome.
Yeah. So Zen, we've seen everything happening at LACMA, but this isn't the only institution, of course. Talk to me a little bit about what's happened, at Centre Pompidou and elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm not going to try and pronounce it. You did it excellently. I'm sure I would butcher the beautiful French language. But yeah, this is one of the largest institutions in Europe. I think it is literally the largest collection of modern art in Europe. And they also acquired a whole bunch of NFTs, an autoglyph, a CryptoPunk. I believe both of those were donated. Others, I think, were not donated. They acquired in other means. But yeah, I think it was 18 or 20 pieces. And it's just like that plus LACMA. It's like the institutions are coming. They're here. More will follow. It's just this watershed moment. It's beautiful. It's fantastic.
And it also, the other thing I'll just add is it has been cool to see Yuga Labs, represent Punkswell. And I think there are all sorts of mixed views, but I think that they did Miami. In Miami, they gave away the Punk, which was positioned right next to a Warhol. It was just such a great juxtaposition, side by side. They've donated this one in Paris. I feel like they're playing the long game here, and they're moving. I appreciate the work they're doing.
Yeah, Sam, that was so great. You and I seen at the ICA Miami. The CryptoPunk adjacent to the Warhol. That was a great moment.
Yeah, and they threw a whole event around it. All the founders were there, and that was quite cool. So one of the things that hit me, and I know you guys might be closer to the people involved here, but is Cosimo's, his whole identity is this CryptoPunk. And I was like, whoa, he's giving that, like this thing he's identified with. And the other thing that really hit me is I think we're just so used to in this space, this assumption that everybody is out for personal profit. And, it's almost, you just have to like take two when someone who I see every day pop up on, Super Rare or whatever, he's buying the most expensive art, and this guy's giving it all away. I was just like, it really occurred to me how incredible of a gesture this was for the space in general, and how nice it was to see a gesture that was so kind of like different from our assumptions about people who are anonymous and out there, talking about their bags, talking about the NFTs they own. And then this guy gives it all away to a museum, really for all of us, to help validate, kind of what we're out here doing. Yeah. So that was one of the things that really jumped out at me. From your experience, from either of your experience kind of in the community, did this particular donation surprise you?
Yeah, like it is an enormous and significant donation. It's like monumental. And like we've seen instances where a person might donate one piece or two pieces, but I don't think we've seen anything of this scale yet. And it's like you said, it's really incredible, heartwarming. And he did it for us. He did it for the space, for the collectors, for the artists, for art blocks, for Super Rare, for Foundation, for Object, for it's just like this is one of the best gestures I've seen from anyone in this space in the time that I've been here.
Now, Sam, sort of going back to your point about this particular CryptoPunk and it being so closely identifiable with Cosmo, are you telling me if you had the opportunity to donate your pink-haired punk, you're saying no?
Man, I don't know if I'm quite there yet. I think.
Well, let me reframe it for you. Imagine going to LACMA, going to a great art museum, and you go into the exhibition, and there's the pink hair punk. It was yours. Wouldn't that feel great?
One thing I joke about on Twitter is I kind of want to give my punks to my kids, but I know they'll get them stolen within a week. They'll just sign them off the minute they get them. So maybe donating to a museum is a better kind of exit plan than giving them to my kids. So you've certainly planted a seed in my head. I've two questions for you, Eli, about this, because one is how do you exhibit these things? Like when you're seeing them there, I'm curious, like what's the best way to exhibit? And I guess one thing I'm curious from both of you is, and this is like kind of a forbidden question in the space, but I'm just going to ask it anyway, is can these museums display NFTs they don't own? A lot of you could go put X copy up. You could say X copy at CC0. I don't know if you have views on that, because that's something that, it's one of the things we all wrestle with in the space is really all you got is a wallet that owns something. But I'm curious those are two very separate questions, but the idea of how is this practically done at a museum like LACMA, like you were there, and then two, kind of, it's something my wife always asks me, and I don't always have a great answer.
I'm getting a little feedback.
Yep, just came through as well.
Good
now.
Yep, same. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Sam, this is a super interesting question on how do you display now this amazing collection? And when I was at the museum, I was walking around with a couple of folks from LACMA on Tuesday, and we were having that exact discussion. It's like, are these digital displays? Are these prints? What are the additional dimensions of an exhibition of this work that is maybe neither, but really brings it to life in the right ways? And at the moment at LACMA, at their Start bar, which is this exterior bar in sort of the main entryway, they're displaying NFTs on 3 of the screens behind the bar. They have works from Emily Shi, they have works from Jen Stark and others. And, that's on the one hand, amazing, right? Again, playing into this trend that we're seeing where now, again, all of these visitors to the museum are, whether they like it or not in that case, engaging with these works as they traverse through that space. But it, on the other hand, does beg this question of, is that the perfect instantiation of these works? I think everyone would agree, not quite. And so, I think there's a long way to go in terms of programming digital art spaces, installations in such a way that, I think they're not wholly what we might expect when we traverse an exhibition in a museum, and that they are sort of crypto native in their own way, but that they resonate broadly and they fit that context appropriately. But I think it's an open question. Sam, that Kevin is a big Danvis fan, as are some of us. And I think, that's a version of what's maybe interesting in the future.
I was going to say, we got to get a Danvas plug in here. We know Kevin loves Danvas, and I went to the event. They have great screens, but Zen, just so we don't leave it open, do you want to kind of comment on the idea of displaying CC0 or like, how do you, I mean, I would never put a picture behind me of something I don't own. So for me, it's a no brainer, but I'm curious.
I've been thinking about it for the last 2 minutes, and I think it's fine. Like for a museum, I think if it's CC0, it's fair game. That's what it is. It's good for the artist, I would argue. It's good for the person who owns the piece. It's good for the collection. It's good for NFTs as a whole. Like if an X copy is in a museum, I think that's great. I think it's very different to you having it behind you than a museum showing it. Like a museum is, the reason they do it is to show off the art, to highlight the artist, to have hundreds of thousands of people view it. I would imagine that they would write who owns the X copy and probably get the permission as just a gesture. I guess in theory they don't have to, but museums are not evil entities. They try to do nice things. And then, so that's what I think for like CC0 works, like X copy. And then I think that for other pieces, they would probably be okay, and I would be okay if they asked, like if they came to me and said, and Artblocks has actually done this for some of their displays. You own some pieces that we would like to display. Do we have your permission? If they get my permission, if they get the artist's permission and display it and all that, like, yeah, I think that's great.
For sure. Yeah, no, yeah. Hopefully we'll see more of this, you know?
I think it's going to be so interesting to see, one, what other museums and institutions come next, because we know it's going to happen now. And then, can we get some grails from our collections in there? Let's see.
That would be awesome.
Eli, when MoMA? 30-second response. I know you know everybody. Tell us when MoMA. We got to hear it.
Well, we know that Rafik has this incredible installation at the MoMA now. And I don't think we could ask for a better start than that. So let's see where it goes.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is interesting because this is the type of stuff that you just have to think like, it makes owning a CryptoPunk or owning Artblocks or owning Clear Silver's where, different from owning a lot of the projects that people want to own for the quick money. It's like quick money, you need airdrops, you need free money in your wallet. That's how you make money. This is the stuff that cements this and legitimizes it over time and hopefully just increases the 5-year game, which I know all three of us is kind of why we've devoted our careers to this space. So moving on, just so we can hit a couple other topics. The last story wanted to talk about just because one thing that's hilarious in this space is things that happened 7 days ago literally feel like it was 3 years ago. But between now and the previous 100 proof was the Super Bowl. And I just want to touch on it because I thought, it was all that anybody was talking about for 48 hours in the space. And then the Blur airdrop hit and it was what no one was talking about at all. But what do you think, Zen? You saw that ad. What do you think were the pros and cons there? Again, I'm talking about Digidaigaku,
right,
who rolled one of the first ads. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. I think they had a tremendous opportunity to showcase and highlight NFTs to an enormous audience. They kind of did that, but they kind of didn't really. So in reality, what happened was a very tiny percentage of people, I don't know, 5,000, maybe slightly more, whatever, they scanned a QR code on the ad and then they were directed to a mint page, and that literally everyone else after that got directed to Gabe Layden's personal Twitter page, which I think at some point just went blank because Twitter couldn't handle it. So I think that is not a great onboarding experience. I think it's not, I don't know, it's not great for anyone. Gabe maybe wins a little out of it, but I think it was kind of a missed opportunity. I will say it's sort of on brand for the Digidaigaku theme. Like Gabe is from Machine Zone, very into mobile gaming. The ad had that aesthetic to it. Sending people to his Twitter where it's, he is again like directing people to the projects. It was on theme, I guess. So I wasn't particularly surprised by the ad or the outcome, but I do think it was like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I thought it was weird. Like, the people within the ecosystem said the reason they did that was to humanize the product. Like people, and I think again that this is not me talking, but I'm looking at your facial reactions.
That was weird to me, but
yeah, no, I mean what they were saying is like it's better to to send people to a person than to Digidaigaku, which no one understands. That's yelling retweet, follow, retweet, follow. Instead, you get Gabe yelling retweet, follow, retweet, follow, which is all that his account ever does anymore. I used to follow him. I like the guy. I think he's one of the most charismatic, kind of visionary. He just talks in a way that no one else does. So it's always fun to listen to him. But I agree with you. I think if you're going to get hundreds of thousands of people looking at NFTs, they had two goals, right? One was to give free money to people, and so that those free money people would become their advocates. I mean, that happened at Goblins. It's happened a lot in NFTs, But the thing is, only a very small number of people get that free money, and and your exit liquidity is someone's new investment that you have to make work as well. So it's not, But their second goal was to get people talking about how these other people got free money. And I think if you're going to do that, then everybody who doesn't get sent to scan, send them somewhere else that gets them talking about the people who got the free money. Explain to them what just went on. Just be like, we just gave away these NFTs. Here's a monitor that says how much those cost, how much those cost now, how much free money was just given away. Like, these are the ways to get involved here. And instead, you just went to a Twitter account that had all caps, retweet, follow. And I think people are already worried about the scams in this space. Not that this is in any way a scam. I mean, Gabe raised $200 million and is putting real money into this project and trying to build something great. But I think we could have onboarded people a lot better. Eli, what do you think?
No, I think that's exactly right. I was just looking it up right now, and maybe take this with a grain of salt, but this is what popped up on Google. 113 million viewers of the Super Bowl. And how many people did we onboard, or did they onboard with this ad? And again, that wasn't maybe the primary objective here, but it feels like such a missed opportunity, right? Like, with that size of an audience, what could we do here with a cleaner onboarding flow to really have impact at scale, and to have 5,000 people or something in that neighborhood have the ability to participate in this? And my assumption is they were all existing participants in the space. That feels like such a huge miss. So like, you can imagine a world where if the NFL had a vested interest in NFTs, and they wanted to run a QR code at the bottom of the telecast for 30 seconds, and that onboarded to the ability to claim some commemorative NFT from the Super Bowl, like, do you get 100,000 people onboarded with that? It's just like, to me, this is such a missed opportunity broadly for the space. Whether it achieved their objectives, you guys can probably speak more elegantly about it than I. But I just love to see more thoughtfulness in terms of the way that we're leveraging those big moments.
I'll jump in and add. I mean, I agree with all of that. I think that I don't think it even achieved their objectives. So it's like the floor price of the dragon eggs. I guess they did this to either get attention and ideally get the floor price to go up and make people happy, and the floor price has kind of dropped for all their collections afterwards. Maybe it was, Carly said this, buy the rumor, sell the news, but I don't really, unless like the entire objective was Gabe to get 200,000 more Twitter followers, and great, mission accomplished. I also think that, it's a missed opportunity, but it's also like putting our worst foot forward. Like, the NFT space being all about, oh my God, you get something for free and then you get money out of it and make money, go. That is the worst part of it. That is how people get scammed. I hate that. I think we should be getting people in and not trying to have them speculate on making money or come in thinking they can make money. It's like, that's how people get wrecked, burned, and then leave the space. And that's why we have a bad rep. So I guess not a fan.
Yeah. Imagine this world for a moment. There's still some financialization of this, but imagine there was a Nike ad and there was a QR code, and that allowed you to claim a Nike shoe that had some generative art output on it. And there's 20,000 of them, let's call it. Maybe there's 50,000, maybe there's 100. I don't know what the scale is, but something that's more thoughtful than a pure financialization of, let's show the broader community or viewers of this ad that you can make money. But what's how do we take that further? There's so much opportunity there.
Yeah. I do think the one thing, like, I agree with what you're saying. There are so many ways you can do it better. This was funded by Gabe Layden shareholders to generate returns for Digidaigaku.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it worked at that at all. You know, I think this was just not. It was basically, honestly, it was just a bunch of bot alpha groups, like with bots figuring out the same bots that are going after art blocks every week. We're going after Digidaigaku's. The price, they got it for free. They made 0.3 ETH. Good on you. No one's talking about it. Like, that's the other thing. There was no buzz. You know, none of my parents sent me a message saying what's up with your silly NFTs. Just none of that happened. But you know, live and learn. And hopefully it made me think about last year where, you know, there was the Nouns glasses, and, you know, we all hoped that Bored Apes would get mentioned by Snoop and Eminem and the halftime show, and it didn't happen. And we were all let down, and Bored Apes went down for 3 weeks, and then they mooned again, as Bored Apes often do when they go down. But yeah, I mean, the one thought that I've had about this week is, I think one of the little debates that I find, and I think it kind of plays out in this Doodles and, you know, Azuki, or maybe Doodles versus D-Gods a little bit. You see the founders make these points. One is saying we need to go out and get other people. You know, Doodles is all about the million new users outside, whereas Frank D-Gods is always saying what we need to do is make the people in this space happy. And if we make the people in this space happy, then we have our biggest advocates. Like, and those are two different philosophies that I think are in the space. And I thought you had the Blur airdrop this week, which was all about the people in the space. This was all about rewarding the people in the space, getting them, buying more NFTs, talking, supporting Blur. And then you also had the Super Bowl ad, which was a botched attempt at getting people from outside. But I thought it was kind of an interesting parallel, given, you know, if you go on Spaces with Frank, you go on Space, you see these conflicting messages. So that was kind of my final thought. I don't know. I do want to give Zeneca the chance to have the final say about everything we've talked to before we wrap up. And Eli, also, if you have anything to say, jump in.
I could just talk for so long on all of these topics. Well, maybe not the Super Bowl, but the Blackma and Blur OpenSea. Like, there's a million more things to say. Final, I'm just still, like, take everything away. Blackma, that's like, I'm high on that for like weeks. It's just like, that is incredible. I think a lot of people maybe are still not appreciating how significant of like, this is huge. This is, yeah, I just can't overstate how incredible that is. And yeah.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, you know, this week in LA, there's the Freeze Art Fair, and been spending a lot of time with artists and curators and gallerists and dealers, and they're taking notice, right? Like, this is coming up, not prompted by me, but by them. They see what's happening, and so it's you know, I think this continued trend and the start of something increasingly interesting in the traditional art world.
Yeah, I think us in the space, we're used to everyone hating on us because everyone thinks NFTs are so ridiculous. But you highlight the things that are negative towards you, and you don't realize that, you know, in the art world, notice that Claire Silver had a sale for $85,000 yesterday. You know, and the art world's noticing that that Sam Spratt has an auction right now that's at $200,000 and it's probably going to go higher. And I think people, I think there's very legitimate things happening in this space, and you'd be silly as an art place, as an art institution, to not at least try to start involving it. So that's great to see. Anyways, Zeneca, so late where you are, 3:30 in the morning, and you're giving it to us, you're giving it to the audience. You know, you've always been so generous with your platform, and we really just tons of gratitude for coming on to the show. You know, we really appreciate it. And Eli, I've always said you are the secret weapon of proof. Every time something's pumping, I ping Eli. He's like, yeah, I know, I own one. So follow this guy on Twitter. You know, he always knows what's going on before it happens. He's the whisperer, man. So thank you guys both. It was awesome having you. Another great show. Derek and Kevin will be back next week. Or I shouldn't say that. I imagine one of them will be back, but I hope they're both back with more 100 proof. And have a great week. We'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, that is it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you would like to help us out, head on over to proof.xyz and click on the reviews button at the very top and leave us a 5-star review. Thanks so much. Take care.